A well-produced case study will never be the only thing your prospect needs to see in order to say yes. But a missing case study could be the one thing that causes them to say no. So it's no surprise that when I work with companies, one of the #1 things that sellers are asking for as part of the messaging activation process is well-produced case studies that they can put in front of prospects. The problem is, a lot of companies aren't willing to pay for a well-produced case study. And why is that? I think there are two main reasons that I want to talk about today. The first is that I think it's hard for a lot of people to understand what a well-produced case study is. When you say the word case study, it's a very broad term. It's hard to understand what that means for the organization, what the sellers are asking the marketing team to create. And so I work with teams on developing strategic case studies where we spend a lot of time, even before we set up interviews, thinking about the story that we want to tell, the value propositions that we want to surface, who would be the best candidate for the interview, what products we want to talk about, and there's a lot of strategy that goes into it. What gets created as a result of that? There's a couple things. We get a long-form narrative case study that you can put on your website, on a landing page, in a blog post, and that's ultimately the #1 place where you're going to be sending people to once the case study exists. But we also create additional assets aside from that. We can create video clips from the interview. We can create testimonials that can be dropped in different assets, different sales decks, and we can also create PDFs that can be left behind or sent as emails. So that's what I would say is a good example of a well-produced case study. Sometimes I think people think that when they're getting a case study, all they're really getting is testimonials that talk about how great the company is, and what you need to do with a case study is go much deeper into the experience because you want to be able to communicate the journey that your customer had. What was their life and situation like before they encountered you and started working with you? What were they able to do when they worked with you, and what outcomes did that ultimately bring for them as an organization? Case studies are strategic. They take a lot of work, and so it's a big investment, and it's one that you need to be able to justify. But it's easier if you have a better idea of what a well-produced case study looks like. So that's #1. The second reason why I think companies are reluctant to spend is because marketing is often asked to foot the bill for the case study creation and do the case study creation themselves. So whether they're working with an expert, a third-party expert that can create case studies like me, or they're spending time working on the case studies internally as a team, they're ultimately the ones that are being asked to spend the money and the time on it. And I think that's a miss. I think because sellers are asking for case studies, that sales and revenue teams should ultimately be the ones who foot the bill. I think they should treat marketing teams like agencies who can create enablement assets for them. So if you want a case study as a sales team, you need to allocate budget for case study creation. You need to give that budget to marketing so that they can spend the money and the time and the energy creating what you're asking for. At the end of the day, the case study is going to impact revenue, right? It's going to help you move conversations along faster, further in the sales cycle. And so I think that's another reason why case studies, well-produced ones anyways, don't get created, because marketing has their own budget. They have their own initiatives that they're working on. Every dollar is allocated for something, and case studies is not always at the top of that list. But if you want it to be at the top of that list, I think you need to have a conversation about where the money comes from, and I think the money needs to come from the sales side of things. Those are my thoughts on case studies. I've produced a ton of really great case studies for clients this past year. If you want to see some examples or you want to talk through the process, let me know in the comments and we can take it from there. All right, have a good day.